Good day, everyone. This is Raymond Espanola of Surigao del Norte State University. My students call me simply Sir Monch. This is the first lecture video for a course on GE, Gender and Society. In this first chapter, we'll be exploring a number of questions that for many people would consider as basic questions, no? And these questions require answers before we touch bigger issues related to gender and society. So the first one, as you can see here, how gender is different from sex, what gender what do we mean by gender identity, gender expression, even gender roles, the gender binary, and also this expression called GNC. You might have encountered this in social media, or gender nonconformity, what it means to be transgender and intersex, and finally, what gender has to do with sexuality. We will end this presentation with SOGIE, no? What SOGIE actually means. So let's have the first question. How is gender different from sex? Sex basically refers to physical characteristics, what we can see in an individual's body or what we can see in genes, in chromosomes. On the other hand, gender refers to social aspects of our identity. Sex is typically assigned at birth, and there are typically two categories of sex, that is male and female. And the assignment of either male or female depends on how your genitalia looks. Okay, so if it's a penis, then automatically you are labeled by doctors as male. If what they see is a vagina, a vulva, then you'd be labeled as female, no? But take note, there are individuals who are called intersex. Intersex are those individuals whose bodies do not fully match our our traditional expectations of what a female body or what a male body is. Okay, so later on, we'll have certain slides to explore further what intersex means. But basically, these individuals do not fully or do not exactly match the our understanding of a male body and a female body. Okay. Now, typical sex development is usually the basis for assignment of sex at birth. So we have individuals with XX chromosomes that would typically grow with uh, ovaries, a vagina, a vulva, and a clitoris. And I believe you already know the answer to this. Those with X and Y chromosomes grow to have what characteristics? Okay, so they will grow with testis, penis, no, epididymis, and so on. So you would have these things, no, these strict binary categories: the male body with a penis and a female body with breast and larger buttocks, no, larger butts. Okay, but again, these are simplified categories for sex because, as I mentioned a while ago, there are individuals who don't fit into these two strict categories, and these individuals are intersex. Okay, so we have this male and female, and I hope by now you realize that when we use the term male and female, we refer to sexual characteristics, no? We refer to sex, being male, being female, and even being intersex. We're talking of sex, okay, not gender, because as I presented in the previous slide, gender is a social dimension of your identity. Okay, so if sex is something that is biological, that is linked to your chromosomes, linked to your physical appearance, gender is so much more. Gender is social in nature. Okay, just as we are assigned a sex at birth, we are also assigned a gender. And sadly, now I say sadly because again, we will explore this later in this video. Our assigned gender generally reflects our assigned sex. People or even the larger community tend to be very straightforward and simplistic in assigning our gender. They tend to automatically believe that if your sex is male, then you should grow as a man. Okay? That being assigned the role of a man is a gender aspect, okay, where there is an element of social interaction, no, or an element of dictating, no, forcing, quote unquote, of other people onto how your identity should be. Okay, so those with vulva are often raised as girls. We give them certain toys. We provide them with certain experiences, which we tend to believe as experiences that should be received by girls, no, or as um, individuals with vagina. And those with penis are often raised as boys. So when a parent, no, would raise a certain individual or would raise a certain child with penis, they would usually assign or buy cars for toys and not dolls, no, for toys. Now, being raised as girls or boys means people assign us gender roles. Now, notice here that we are specific this time. No, what people assign to us, no, what other people, what the community, what the society dictates, quote unquote, to us are gender roles. Okay, these are positions, behaviors, responsibilities, or expectations based on what they have assigned to us. That is either being a man or being a woman. Okay, but remember, the the behaviors or the expectations to being a man and the expectations of being a woman can vary from country to country or even within countries. Okay, so no um, there are no rigid sets of behaviors as to what it means to be a man and what it means to be a woman in any culture. Okay, so here's a typical image, no, of what it means to be assigned with sex and gender at the same time. Okay, again, at birth, we are always assigned with either a male or a female, depending on our physical attributes, no? But at the same time, the society also labels us, assigns us of a gender that is in a manner that is straightforward. So if the baby is male, then the baby is a boy, no? If the baby is a female, then the baby is girl, no? And when these individuals grow up, the assignment of gender roles continues, no? That females are expected to be the housekeeper, no? They're expected to take care of children, while those boys, when they grow up, they are expected to, go outside to be the provider of the family. So we tend to have this, really strict assignment of gender roles. Aspects of our sex are biological and physical, while, take note, Many aspects of our gender are socially learned and acquired through social interactions. So, as you can see here, there are a lot of differences between sex and gender. Sex can be, a non-human characteristic, can be found in animals, while gender is unique to humans. Because again, these are assigned to us by other people through social interactions. But as you will learn in this lecture video, you will see that gender is so much more. It's not just limited to being a man and a woman. It's not limited to the roles or expectations that the society assigns to us, but it's multifaceted, complex, exists on a continuum. It can change over time, and it really differs a lot. It differs significantly from sex. Okay. And it can mean femininity, masculinity, or even the use of our language, such as him or his, um, her, or even they, etc. And also, as we move forward in the other chapters, no, that we have prepared for this course, you will see that the bigger society, culture, politics, history, ethnicity, and so on, all have, have roles to play in the development of gender. Okay, while the development of sexual characteristics are just dependent on biology, hormones, chromosomes, gene expression, and so on. Now, I hope that's clear, no? Now, let's move to gender identity. What is gender identity? Gender identity is how we know ourselves, our understanding of who we are, our innermost sense, our private understanding, our subjective understanding of whether we are a man or a woman or something else entirely. Okay, now take note, gender identity is not the same as gender role. Previously, no, a gender role is something that is assigned by the society to us, no? The expected behaviors, the expected responsibilities. But again, when we speak of GI or gender identity, that is who we think we are in terms of gender. Okay, so whether how we understand ourselves, are we a man, a woman, or something else? For some people, gender identity is congruent to the sex assigned at birth. Okay, leading people to believe that sex and gender should match. Okay, because again, that's actually for most people, I would say that their gender identity would mean, or that their gender identity entails congruence between their assigned sex at birth and their sense of who they are. Okay, now what really makes someone a man or a woman? Is it our physical characteristics? So that's a question that's worth pondering. Is being a man or a woman dependent on our biological makeup or dependent on what other people label us or dependent on how we understand ourselves? Okay. Now, the answer here is this one, that gender identity, what makes us a man or a woman, is dependent on how our brain thinks about ourselves as gendered beings. This is what really matters. Okay? What matters is how our brain processes. Okay? Processes our self as a gendered individual and what those genders mean to us regardless of what body parts we or do not possess. Okay, so again, let me repeat myself. What makes a man or a woman, what makes someone a man or a woman is not solely dependent on the physical characteristics that they possess, not dependent um, on what how they look like, okay? But it depends on how they see themselves, okay? So imagine, let's say, for example, the the famous answer of a Miss Universe candidate, and I'm sure you've heard of this, that the essence of being a woman is when that particular individual can bear a child. Okay. Now, that was a controversial question, or that was a controversial statement, because there was an implication that those female individuals who were impotent, who couldn't bear children, are they not women at all because they couldn't bear children? Okay. So it raised a lot of, debate. It became a subject of a lot of debates that being a woman was being tied to the ability to bear, the ability to conceive a child. No, until such time that we have this current modern understanding that no, being a woman or even being a man is not dependent on whether we can conceive children. It's not dependent on what our bodies look like, but it really depends on how our brain thinks about ourselves as gendered individuals. Okay? So it's not dependent on what body parts we have, and so on. Now, there are general types of people based on gender identity. So we have cisgender people. These people have congruent sex and gender identity. So their sex assigned at birth is male, and then their subjective understanding of who they are is they're men. Okay? So that is congruent. No? On the other hand, if an individual is biologically female, and then her understanding of her identity is she's a woman, that is congruent. And again, these are cisgender people. Okay. Now, on the other hand, transgender people are those people with incongruent sex and gender identity. Okay. So, how does this look like? An individual born as biologically male thinks that he is born in the wrong body and that he truly is a woman and therefore should be called she. Okay? So, again, in that example, there is incongruence. When an individual has that kind of, or is in that kind of situation where there is inconsistent, or um, the sex assigned at birth doesn't match to the ideal or the typical gender identity, that's called they are called transgender people or simply transgender. Okay. So as early as 3 years old, toddlers already have a sense of gender identity. That is, as early as 3 years old, toddlers have an understanding of what they are, no, of who they are in terms of gender identity. Are they a boy or a girl? And despite having it early on, gender identity is not always expressed in words or actions. Okay? So, kasagaran, later pa siya mahibalaan kung ang gender identity ba ng tao, ng bata, is cisgender or transgender. So kay naay mga cases na ginatago siya. Ngano kaha ginatago siya? Ngano man di man siya always gina-express. So later on, we'll also have a slide on that. Now, what is gender expression? This is another term. Gender expression is how a person expresses his or her or their outward his or her gender identity, no, the from the term itself, expression, how the individual manifests, how the individual displays outwardly his or her or their gender identity. Characteristics that are commonly gendered include clothing, jewelry, and hair length and style. Also includes activities, interests, and mannerisms that are observable. Okay, so your interest in certain sports, that can be your way of gender expression, no? Your manner of clothing or your choice of jewelry items. Okay, so there are boys who would like to have long hair. There are also boys who would like to use tote bags. Okay, and as you can see here, or as you will see later, gender expression can be independent from the person's sex and gender identity. Okay, there are okay, let's have this example. There are people who are cisgender men, for example. Cisgender men, again, are those biologically males, and they understand that in terms of gender identity, they are men. Okay, so and there are individuals who are cisgender men, but they use feminine clothing. They use um, feminine bags, such as tote bags, you know? So, yeah, mauna ang mga complexity ng gender expression. Now, general gender expressions include masculinity. Masculinity, as the society understands, as our society defines it, means acting tough or sporty or being aggressive, dominant, or even unemotional. Femininity means behaving in a nurturing way or being gentle. And also a gender expression is gender nonconformity or GNC. That is um if you don't align yourself to either masculinity or femininity. Important note to remember is that gender expression may or may not correspond with gender identity. That's what I was talking about a while ago. That someone can be a cisgender man, but his gender expression is feminine. Okay? So, suot siya tote bag, for example. Pero it doesn't make him transgender. Okay? So, ang cisgender man or any biologically male individual nga mag-tote bag or magbutang ng earrings or magpataas ng hair doesn't automatically mean they are transgender. Okay? Dili pasabot na naanay incongruence sa ilang sex and gender identity. That's why, again, remember, GE or gender expression may not always correspond with gender identity or GI. And when that happens, when there is no correspondence between the two, that doesn't mean abnormality. Okay? That's normal. Now, gender expression varies depending on the cultural context and time. Consider crying, for example. Crying is a sign of vulnerability in many cultures. So, and crying is also considered in many cultures, including the Philippines, as a feminine behavior. Na, ay, lakhila ka, oh, mura kag bae. Lakhila ka, grabe ni mo ka-weak. So there is this assignment of the society that crying is something that is feminine. But take note, in other cultures, crying is a sign of heroism. Okay? And in feudal Japan, so in the early days of Japan, crying was a masculine gender expression because it was considered as a form of heroism. Now, I have a question here. What other behaviors are examples of gender expressions that vary across culture? So I also got this image online that in the early 20th century, boys were dressed in pink because pink was considered a masculine color. And girls were dressed in feminine colors, and blue was considered a feminine color. The division of colors for gender only changed during World War II. So imagine that's how it all began. We started, or early in the history of humanity, that pink was considered feminine. No, pink was considered masculine, but now it's different. So as you can see in movies, for example, Barbie, no, or even toys that you can see in stores right now. So pink is often associated with girls and femininity, while blue is often associated with trucks, associated with um, toys for boys, or even clothes for boys. Okay, so you see how gender roles changes, or how the manner of expressing gender changes. And we also have this Brad Pitt. So as you can see, Brad Pitt in 2022, I don't know what event was this, but he was seen wearing a skirt. Okay. And he's wearing pink. And it was somewhat, telling the media that um, skirts and pinks are no longer masculine items, or shouldn't be strictly assigned to men. And of course, how could you miss Harry Styles? In 2020, I think this was part of his kaning nahimo siyang cover ng Vogue, and the agendum that time was to really make fashion genderless, and he became the icon of that. Na men can wear certain clothing such as this, as you can see in the image, and that it doesn't make the person any feminine. Okay, the person's worth is the same, that the person remains to be cisgender. Okay, and yeah, what can you say about this? What does this say about gender? That when a man brings fast food, we would consider them we would consider that man as a funny dad, no? Kay na ay pasalubong and so on. But when a woman, a mother, brings with her fast food, we would consider her as a lazy mom. So unsa may nahitabo diha na mga stereotypes or prejudices na dapat ang babae magluto sa balay. So these are one of the issues that we will explore in the other chapters, no? But this is just a preview. Now, let's go to gender roles. What are gender roles? Gender roles are those spoken and unspoken duties that are assigned to a person based on their sex or gender identity. Gender roles not only vary throughout the globe and over time, but also within a particular community. In 1870 in the US, women worked as miners, steel workers, hunters, and even locksmiths. In ancient Egypt, there were powerful women who held highest positions in government, for example, Cleopatra. And in our case, in the Philippines, before the Spaniards came to colonize us, we used to have female leaders called babaylans, who were warriors, healers, priestesses, and sages. Okay. And the thing here is gender roles are fluid. Okay. However, within a specific culture, if one departs from the norms of accepted gender roles, skepticism and devaluing are common. Okay. So if a certain individual biologically male and expected to behave in a masculine manner, but deviates, okay? Gastray siya, okay? Ni-depart siya from that social expectation. That is often a subject of skepticism by a lot of people. Na ay bayot, na ay feminine, ay kahina, ay ka-weak. So, muratog sa previous na image na akong na-present earlier, kung ang nanay dili mo luto ga dala ra og fast food ay puluho na dayon siya. So there is devaluing, okay? Berating of individuals when they do not follow the accepted norms of the accepted gender roles, no? Or the norms of accepted gender roles. Maski na nagka-change man na siya. Dili man siya constant. Okay? Gender roles are fluid to begin with. In the Philippines, do you see equality in gender roles among individuals? Or if you've read the article on the ranking of the Philippines in terms of world gender equality, say reaction ni mo na naabatay equality sa gender roles. Okay? So kung ang males and females ba ga-receive ng equal participation in the government, equal representation in the government, or even equal income? Okay. So yeah, those are questions that we will answer in class. Now, a quick recap. So far, what we have covered are these concepts, 5 concepts. What sex is, what gender is, and we have more specific gender-related concepts, gender identity, gender expression, and gender roles. Okay, so when we have this expression gender as it is, no? Gender is broad, okay? It refers to a lot of dimensions, gender roles, the what people expect of us, gender identity, our self-concept, our belief, our understanding of who we are, gender expression, our outward expression of who we are. Okay? And sex, of course, is the biological element of, our identity. Now, what we have not covered so far are the following. What we mean by gender binary, GNC or gender nonconformity, being transgender, being intersex, and the complex interaction between gender and sexuality. And this is where we talk about being heterosexual and being homosexual. Now, what is gender binary or what is the gender binary? The gender binary refers to a structure of understanding wherein sex and gender are viewed as consisting only of 2 choices, male, female, man, woman, masculine, feminine, and nothing in between. Okay? That's why we call this the gender binary. I would say this is our limited way of categorizing individuals in terms of gender, that we like to just have 2 options in our resume, in our biodata forms. We just often, or even in survey forms, no, we often have 2 categories, male, female, man, woman, or even in our language, he, she, him, her. Okay? And that that's a tradition, no? A societal thing, a cultural thing, that there are only 2 options. Okay? Now, when we think about sex or gender in a binary system, we tend to identify characteristics that are exclusive to one or the other, rather than traits that many people across different genders share. Okay, so murag mag-suffer ta na atong makita ang complex behaviors which are part of being gendered individuals kung mo follow kita strictly aning binary system. Kay ato namang igrupo ang duha. Men, women, males, females. Okay? So murag kani, boy or girl. Why is it that our society seems to maintain the gender binary? The answer is related to power or social influence. So many would say that there that the binary system has to be maintained because of a certain structure in society that involves the keeping of patriarchy. Okay, that if you are born as biologically male and then you have to grow to be a man and then you have to be the leader of the family or the leader of the community, while the others, women, you're supposed to be subjects, no, followers, and so on. That's why right from the start, no, there are many families who would celebrate birth of boys, no? And the celebration for the birth of girls is often less grand because again, we have this, you know, understanding that there are only two categories and that one gender is more superior, therefore has to be more celebrated. Okay? The gender binary is so ingrained in our culture that most of us don't realize that it's causing problems. Most of us don't notice or don't question it because we consider it as the normal system. Even the way we speak is inherently binary. So we're all guilty of this. We just say boys, girls, we just say he or she, no? But this is one thing that we will explore in chapter 2, the history of gender. Take note that throughout history, there were multiple genders that existed. A significant number of people have begun to use words like, that's why today, no, we're talking of the modern day. That today, a significant number of people have begun to use words like non-binary, or genderqueer to describe themselves. So they may see themselves as androgynous or gender neutral, or they may oppose the boundaries of binary gendering. Okay? So kanang mga transgender, for example, many of them would call themselves non-binary. That is, they don't want to be subjected into the binary gendering system. Okay? Or kani mga non-binary people. Ang non-binary kanang ilang ginaopo, ilang gina-dismiss na okay, no, we don't want to be considered man or woman. We are genderless. We are gender neutral. Okay? So don't categorize us using that. Okay. Now, what is gender nonconformity? So we have here an image of Oswaldo Gomez, aka Miss Colombia. So this person was found dead in New York City in 2018. And yeah, it was, a sad day for LGBT community in the US. And I'm sure there were also a lot of similar people who were found dead also, who were victims of certain violence here in the Philippines because they were different, because they were gender non-conforming. What do we mean by gender non-conforming? It refers to the experience of someone who doesn't identify or express as culturally accepted set of gendered behaviors or actions associated with the sex they were assigned at birth. Some people describe their gender identity as gender non-conforming or GNC. Okay, so ang uban, moingon sila nga, ang ilang gender identity cisgender, ang uban pod moingon sila trans. Okay? Trans people are people whose gender identity is gender non-conforming. Kay wala siya nag-conform sa kung unsay gi-expect ng society na ilang gender expression or kung unsa dapat sila. Okay? So dili sila mo conform sa kung unsa expectation ng society. Not because they are rebels, no. But it's just because they have a different understanding. Mao ganito balik ta sa gender identity. Their understanding of who they are just doesn't match. Just their doesn't match to their assigned sex at birth. Okay? Mao man ang brain nila. That's how they brain processes their identity. Okay? That's why they are gender non-conforming. Okay? What are examples of gender non-conforming behaviors that you can think of? Actually, I have a neutral example here. When a husband stays at home full-time doing all the chores. Okay? That is an example of a gender non-conforming behavior. Kaya nga naman, ang society nag-expect generally nga ang husband dapat mao'y provider ng family. So karon kung si husband naara siya sa balay kay ang iyang asawa ang nagtrabaho full-time, that is already gender non-conforming. Okay? But take note, that doesn't mean being transgender. Okay? So that's why we separate our discussion here of gender non-conformity. Anything that doesn't match, no? That doesn't identify. If someone doesn't identify or express kung unsay gi-expect sa iya ng society, okay? That is GNC, okay? Gender non-conformity. Now, an important note for all of us, people who demonstrate GNC behaviors may identify in a variety of ways. Pwede cisgender sila, pwede transgender sila, or pwede non-binary sila. However, many people who identify themselves as GNC often see themselves as falling under the transgender umbrella. Mao nitong na akong na-mention a while ago na oftentimes, ang mga GNC, these are transgender individuals. Kay lagi, dili man congruent ang ilang sex sa ilang way of understanding themselves, ilang gender identity. Okay? But again, that shouldn't limit our understanding of what GNC means because again, GNC or demonstrating gender non-conforming behaviors is not limited to transgender people because even cisgender people or non-binary people do gender non-conforming behaviors. Now, there are other terms, there are many terms actually that would be considered as GNC or gender non-conforming. Non-binary, not identifying as a man or woman. A gender, not having any gender. Okay, mao ni ang mga tao nga moingon sila nga, no, I'm not a man, I'm not a woman, I'm something else. Okay, and I don't possess any of these qualities. Okay, bigender, having two genders, multigender, multiple gender, gender fluid, flexible, fluid, changing identity, gender queer, another word to identify outside of the binary. Now, this is the most important thing, or not the most important, but one of the important things that you should remember to respectfully use the correct gender identity for someone. If he is a he or a she or a they, it's usually best to ask them or leave them be, as in leave them alone. Okay? Mind your own business. Because remember, gender identity is something that is private, that is individual, that is subjective. That's how the brain of that person understands who she or he or they are. Okay? So you cannot impose on a person's identity na moingon kag ay trans ka, ay cisgender ka, ay bigender ka, or ay non-binary ka. No. Okay? It's not our story to tell. Okay? It's best to just ask the person if you're close, or if you're not close, mind your own business. Okay? Wait until the person opens up. Okay? Now, what it means to be transgender. Transgender refers to someone who identifies with a gender that is outside the expectations associated with the sex they were assigned at birth. So, maotong transgender men or trans men. So, transgender women or trans women. Now, do we consider trans women as women? I think we answered this already, that being a woman or being a man is just dependent on how the person understands him or herself. Okay, so it doesn't depend on physical attributes, physical characteristics, but on their um, self-concept. Okay, so if an individual says, if a transgender woman asserts that she is a woman, we need to respect that. Okay, because that's her gender identity. Now, important notes for everybody. Being transgender is separate from being gay, lesbian, or non-binary. Okay? You should not confuse being transgender with being gay or being lesbian. Okay? Because that's different. Later on, I'll tell you what being gay or what being lesbian means. But again, don't lose focus. Being transgender is just about being being identifying with a gender that is outside the expectation of the sex assigned at birth. Now, being transgender is not also an extreme version of being gay. So, di ba, na atay tendency to believe na ay boy, no? A young child, pang male, tapos kanang very feminine, and then people would comment like, magpatotoy na na siya or magsayal na na siya. So, murag na atay expectation na kanang kung grabe na kabayot sa nga tanan, mao na mahimo na siyang transgender. Daily. Because again, being gay is different from being transsexual. Okay? And also, being transgender is not a result of some trauma, poor parenting, or abuse. Okay? It's not, it's not that. Transgender identity remains to be stigmatized in many societies, which is why young children who are GNCs cause distress to parents. So, ang mga parents, syempre, all parents love their children. And when they notice gender nonconformity, na murag, unsa man ni akong bata nga laki, mura mag-feminine. So, ma-stress ang parents. Ma-stress ang parent, not because oftentimes, dili nila accepted ilang bata. Ma-stress sila tungod kay they know how society can be harsh to people who are gender non-conforming, no? So mag-worry sila na Diyos ko, mabully ini sa classroom, um, maabusa, ma-subject ini siya sa, abuse later in life tungod kay vulnerable siya to, to those abuses. These young children who are GNCs experience also anxiety, no? Getting warned of embarrassment. So mag-worry po sila for themselves, no? Na, oy, mapasipgan ka jud ka sa class sa eskwelahan tungod kay you're different or you are performing behaviors, you do behaviors that are not conforming to what society expects of you. Now, again, an important note. Many masculine presenting girls or tomboys do not grow up to be transgender. Okay, again, being masculine is is about gender expression. Okay? That's an outward expression. So kung masculine presenting an isa ka girls, dili na nabuti pasabot na transgender. Siguro gender non-conforming but not necessarily being a transgender. Okay? Many feminine boys also do not grow up to be trans girls, and not all transgender young people demonstrate gender non-conforming behaviors. Now, gender identity can be closely related to gender expression, but they are not necessarily equivalent. Okay, mao na lahi ang gender identity because again, that's in the brain. Okay? Ang gender expression also different because that is that is outwardly expressed. Okay? How do we know when someone is transgender? If ang tao ga cross-dress, you are wrong if that's your answer. Or if your answer is kanang sex reassignment, you are wrong also. Okay? Kaya again, ang pagka-transgender naa sa understanding ng tao sa iyang brain nga wala nag-match sa iyang sex ang iyang identity. Okay? So dili kinahanglan nga ni undergo na si jag sex change para tawagon nimo si jag trans. No. Tawagon nato ang tao nga trans kung ang tao nag-ingon mismo nga ang iyang identity is not congruent sa iyang sex assigned at birth. Okay? And also, kung ga-cross-dress siya, unsa may cross-dressing, if a biologically male dresses up to in a feminine way, posible gender non-conforming lang na siya kay mao may iyang gusto magsayal siya pareha ni Harry Styles pero dili na buti pasabot na trans na siya or another man na ganahan mag tote bag, mag shoulder bag tapos trans na dayon siya. No. Okay? Because again, being transgender is a matter of gender identity alone. Okay? Now, what it means to be intersex. Now, I mentioned in the early part of this lecture video that sex refers to our observable or to those physical characteristics that we can see usually at birth. Okay? What we know are these ends. Kaning peach or unsa ni nga ang fruit na murag resemble siya og vagina and the other end kaning banana ga resemble ng penis. So there are two categories of sex, female and male, but this time, this is going to change your understanding of sex, no? That there is a spectrum for sex. There are a lot of sexual characteristics that can fall in between vagina and penis. Okay? These are intersex people. Intersex are those whose sexual or reproductive organs develop differently than the typical male or female body. No? The antiquated term hermaphrodite is now considered offensive, so we don't call them hermaphrodites anymore. Some physicians categorize intersex people as having disorders of sex development, but again, that's pathologizing. A less pathologizing phrase is these are people with differences in sex development. They just develop differently. They didn't develop abnormally, no. They just had different sexual development. Why? Most intersex people are healthy, and their only major differences from others are in their sexual or reproductive organs. Mao ni ang mga itsura. Okay? So inyo na lang lantawon sa images here. So ang intersex, there are a lot of kinds of intersex people kay depende sa differences in sexual development. So na ay murag penis tapos below that murag resemble og vagina. So murag present ang duha ka organs or even ang duha murag absent jud ang duha ka organs. Okay? So di ba lang tawag diri sa most bottom. So murag na porma iyang penis pero sa ilayom sa iyang scrotum sa kaning mga balls sa iyang testicles na apay vaginal canal. Okay? So again, unsaan man nimo ni pag-categorize, male or female? No, not male, not female, but intersex. Okay? Some intersex people consider themselves to be part of the LGBTQ spectrum, while others do not identify to be part of the community. That's why we have longer forms of the abbreviation. Mahimo siyang LGBTQIA+, which means lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer, intersex, and asexual. Okay? Now, questions to ponder. Is being intersex a disease or a medical condition? I believe I have answered this already. It's not a disease because most of them would grow to have normal lives, no? It's just that they undergo differences in sexual development. Is being intersexual a type of gender? The answer is no also, because intersex is a matter of sex, just the S. Okay? So it's a complication, or it's a complex part of sex, of being male and female, that not everybody can be strictly categorized as male or female, because there can be no variations, and these are intersex. Are transgender people and intersex people the same? Of course, again, no, because when we say intersex, it's about sex, physical characteristics. But when we say transgender, we're talking of gender identity. We're talking of how the person identifies himself. Okay. Are intersex people automatically gay or lesbian? Um, I will leave this question to you. Okay, what does gender have to do with sexuality? So this is an interesting part now, or the last part also. Gender identity refers to our own sense of how we see ourselves, while sexuality is defined as the gender or genders of the people we are attracted to. So naana sa term daan mismo, unsa ning sexuality, no? Ang atong attraction, asa ta ma-attract, asa ta ma-fall in love. Sexuality, or formally SO, sexual orientation, is an enduring pattern of romantic or sexual attraction, or a combination of these, to persons of the opposite sex or gender, the same sex or gender, or to both sexes or more than one gender. Okay? So in short, asa ka ma-in love, asa ka ma-arouse sexually. Mao ni ang sexual orientation. So there are a lot of um, categories. That's why it's a sexual orientation spectrum, natay heterosexual. Our common term for heterosexual people are straight people. These are people who get attracted to opposite sex or opposite gender. Okay? So a man, ma-attract siya sa woman, or biologically female, ma-attract sa biologically male. Ang homosexual, na duha ka buok, homosexual male or homosexual female. Ang homosexual male, mao na ang gay. Ang homosexual female, mao na ang lesbian. They are people who get attracted to people of the same sex or gender. Okay? Bisexual, people who get attracted to both genders. So again, take note, kaning tulo padaan, they talk about attraction. Asa siya ma-in love. Matter of feelings. Romance. Ganiha, lahi. Okay? Kay nag-istorya tag gender identity, na sa brain, cognition, understanding niya, ang gender expression, behaviors, sa clothing, and so on. Ang sex is ang biological characteristics. Okay? So kani is different sexual orientation. Asa ma-in love, asa ma-attract, asa ma-arouse sexually. We have queer people or pansexual, people whose attractions span across many different gender identities, questioning or curious, people who are not sure about their sexual orientation, and asexual, people who don't experience any sexual attraction for anybody. Okay? Now, sexual orientation is an enduring pattern. Take note, enduring pattern of romantic or sexual orientation. Pero, na ay mga tao nga ga-engage in sexual activities nga dili necessary nga mahimo na silang homosexual or bisexual. Na ay mga tao nga ginabuhat lang nila ang sexual activities for work. Okay? So tungod kay ginabuhat lang man niya for work, dili siya enduring pattern. Okay, lahi man gajud ning enduring pattern kay mao man gajud ang imong mag-endure throughout sa imong kinabuhi na diha jud ka ma-in love ka sa opposite sex or ma-in love ka sa the same sex. Okay? Now, there are people who are sex workers nga mo engage sila sa certain romantic activities pero sa temporary lang na pamaagi, sa temporary lang na duration. Okay? We have MSM, men have sex with men, na dili necessary na gay sila. Okay? Okay, again, it's possible nga ila lang siya ginabuhat for work. Okay? Ang women having sex with women or FSF, female having sex with females. So also maupod na ang workers ng pod, no? Ang uban na ginabuhat lang niya for work but dili necessary na maoy iyang gusto. Dili mao ang pattern na mag-endure sa iyang kinabuhi. Okay? So mao to. Ang heterosexual sex, of course, these are individuals who engage in sexual activity with another opposite gender. So here is the gender-bred person or the gender-bred image. So kung as a recap, just a summary, ang gender identity as you can see na as a brain, na as a understanding, na subjective, only the person can tell kung unsa siya. Okay, ang attraction mao ni ang sexual orientation. Na as a heart, asa siya ma-attract, asa siya ma asa siya ma-fall in love. Ang expression, as you can see, is from head to toe. Kay mao man na ang iyang appearance, outward, makita sa tao kung ginaunsa niya pag-present iyang kaugalingon sa society. While sex is what you can see in between the legs. Okay? Ang biology. So, ang sex can be male, female, and intersex. And here is a detailed look on those four items, no? Gender identity, GI, can be man or a woman. Ang gender expression, feminine, masculine. Sex assigned at birth, female, male, or intersex. And ang attraction. So, asa man siya ma-attract. Okay. Now, in closing, take note, every person has a unique SOGIE. Unsay SOGIE, therefore, S would stand for sex, O or SO would stand for sexual orientation, GI would stand for gender identity, and E or GE, that's gender expression. These are the four concepts which are related to Gender 101. Okay? Naatay current na term karon na gigamit sa ubang communities and scholars, so GSC. Gina-clarify lang niya nga actually similar lang siya, just the same lang. So GSC would be SO, sexual orientation, GI, gender identity, E, gender expression, ang SC, sexual characteristics. Or in this case, sa atong slide karon, that is sex. Okay, I still choose to use SOGI kay may mas naandan sa atong conversation na SOGI are four elements of our gender and sexual identities na mag-go together but not necessarily equivalent sa isa't isa. Lahi ang sex, independent siya sa sexual orientation, independent pod silang duha sa gender identity, and the three of them are all independent from gender expression. When I say independent from one another, what pasabot, pwede lahi ang imong sex, lahi imong sexual orientation, gender identity, gender expression, possibly non-conforming, possibly unpredictable pattern, possibly sibiyag sila tanan. Okay, kay posible na ang imong sex is female na tao ka nga naay ang isa ka individual na tao nga naay vagina. Tapos ang iyang gender identity kay transgender. So nagpa kuan siya ang iyang understanding sa iyang kaugalingon is he's a boy. Okay? Pero ang iyang gender expression kay boy na gani iyang understanding sa iyang self, iyang gender identity is feminine. Kay gasuot siya pambabae kay iyang trabaho drag queen. So gasayaw-sayaw siya tapos gagamit siya gown and so on. So you see that alone is already a complex SOGIE. Biologically female, transgender man, feminine. Okay? So ambot kung ma-accommodate na ninyo sa inyong brain, but that person actually exists. Kung galantaw mo og drag race, so na ay drag queen na ing ana siya na biologically female pero drag queen siya. So trans siya. So gina-present niya iyang kaugalingon as a man. Maskin pitit siya kay biologically female lagi siya. Pero ga-make up siya, feminine, gasuot ng gown kay drag queen man siya. So, this is an invitation for all of you to also describe, pin down, unsa may imong SOGIE. Okay? You don't need to share that in class. You don't need to share that to everybody because it can be your own personal subjective sense of identity, your SOGIE. Okay? So na individuals are not necessarily or should not be strictly categorized as male or female or man or woman. That we should not be satisfied or contented with the gender binary. No. We should not limit ourselves on the gender binary or the binary gendering system na naaray duha. No. Because what we truly have is SOGIE. So everybody has unique SOGIE. You have unique configuration of SOGIE nga lahi sa imong kauban, lahi sa ako, and lahi sa everybody else. Okay? So na ay mga tao nga biologically male. Ang gender identity, cisgender. Pero feminine. 'Di ba? So kung mag-istorya siya kay kanang murag kanang pinataas, high pitch, kanang feminine gyud na boses. Tapos ang iyang sexual orientation kay heterosexual, married siya sa babae. 'Di ba? That's possible. So kita mahimot ang judgmental kay nay amor man siya bayot tapos nagminyo siya. So in the first place nga man bayot man siya imong tawag na kung mogamit kitag term na bayot mas mag-create siya confusion and conflict kay syempre ang bayot can mean a lot of things. Gay, feminine, and so on. It's best if we always um we always consider the person's SOGIE, no? Dili lang kung ato lang siya i-box na baji, bayot, tomboy, and so on. Unsay SOGIE? Di ba daghan? Pag profile na nimo, okay, kani di ay ka. So naa kay mixed combination, naa kay unique combination of who you are in terms of identity nimo, no? In as far as sex and gender are concerned. And that's the end of the chapter. So you know what to do or you know what will happen. So I will be asking you these questions and these other questions. Thank you for listening.